In the Colombian case, most of displaced population are IDPs, internal displaced persons. I don't want to explain much about the conflict because it's so big and so complex, but it's a long conflict over 60 years of internal conflict. Different actors, all the actors are committing violence acts that make displacement. One of the reasons I picked this master program is to understand this reality that I saw it, and maybe why not when they could help this population. Right? There is over 9 million of displaced people in Colombia. That makes Colombia the second biggest displaced situation just after Syria. This graphic shows very clear how the violence and against the civil population provoked the displacement, but we can see that the displacement in Colombia has a political and economic reasons. The displacement is mainly done in highly productive and economic zones. So people that displace used to sell or take this land to have different economies, like illegal economies or big plantations, petroleum extraction, different economies. We can see I highlight the four peace efforts. The first one in 1985 has not a big consequence because after that the conflict kept evolving. But after 2002, we can see a big decrease in the hostilities, and that it's a big example of how these peace talks, even when they fail, they have an impact on the conflict, in the war dynamics, and of course in the reduction of violence. In 2002, the annual rate of displacement was around 800,000 displaced per year. So it is a huge number. It's super huge number. In 2006, was around 500,000 a year. So anyway, it's still very high rates. But after 2006, at the mobilization of the paramilitary groups, there was a big decrease. And in the previous years of the peace agreement in 2016, during the peace talks in La Habana, the decrease of the violence and the displacement is evident.
We're seeing increased mixed migration flows and public calls for more accountability. And especially in the Europe context, we see a lot of human rights organizations, NGOs, IOM reports on violations of human rights in Europe. More is known about corruption and violations of human rights in countries of origin and countries of transit. However, because of all these reports of violations on Europe's borders and with, asylum seekers, refugees, it's also important to analyze more what's going on in these European host countries and what these policies are doing. And with the European Union, it gets very complicated. We're not just talking about national law and policy, we're talking about a supranational entity. And especially since 2015, when the European Union declared a refugee crisis, there's been more and more emerging literature and academic theories on these topics of lack of transparency, lack of accountability, lack of transparency, with Frontex, the EU agency, Coast and Border Guard. So there's so many things going on, and it's complex. And part of my research is to try to understand what's going on in between a policy and the actual reality on the ground. I think all of us students, for sure, some of these authors and their theories should sound familiar, as I know definitely in our migration studies, we have come across Katz and Freeman and comparative migration studies. Katz and Freeman as well, they discuss the different typologies of migration policy making that scholars have tried to create. And in the end of the day, we see a mix of everything. And sometimes these typologies work, sometimes they don't. But in the modern day with asylum, seeing how the role of the international diffusion of norms places barriers on states' ability to refrain from migration and to observe rights. So for my research, what I am doing is analyzing migration policies in the EU and in the context of national law in Germany and Greece, and seeing what obligations they have for human rights. And then by doing interviews, trying to understand more exactly what's happening on the ground in terms of violations and which rights and from where.